The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Autumn in New England always brings an abundance of colorful foliage and flowers, and of course, a full harvest of the season's locally grown fruits and vegetables to brighten our dinner tables. Along with this bounty, one tiny creature keeps itself very busy by gathering the different nectars from these plants to produce one of nature's own miraculous products. I'm speaking, of course, about honey. And in spite of their tiny size, this industrious little creature possesses an inexhaustible energy we can all admire. To them, busy as a bee is serious business. So let's join our host and learn why the honeybee is an important and indispensable addition to our natural environment.
Hello, I'm Linda Temperino. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Garden Gate. Today we've stepped out of a garden and into a greenhouse. We're out at Brookdale Farm, and we're going to be joined later on by a beekeeper. His name is Alden Marshall, and he's from Hudson. And we're going to talk about the care of bees and how they benefit our gardens and our food chain. And I hope you enjoy the episode. I think it's going to be quite interesting. Today we're out in the land of pumpkins and apples. But we're not here about the pumpkins and apples today. We're here to find out what makes them flourish out here in Hollis. This is Alden Marshall. He is a beekeeper from Hudson, and these are his hives. And he's going to talk about the plight of the bees, the honeybees. Alden, I understand from what I've been reading and hearing on the newspaper that there's been a bit of a problem with the dying off of the honeybees. What's going on?
Well, unfortunately, it's a combination of a lot of things, and trying to pinpoint one particular thing it isn't very successful. So what they find is that it's a combination of viruses. That we have what is called a mite that invades the hives. All hives now in this country have this varroa mite. It's an external mite that parasitizes the bees. It takes the energy from them. And not only does it do that, but it passes on viruses that these mites carry. Mm-hmm. And these viruses are a problem. And compounding the problem of the viruses and the mites is one thing: lack of variable forage. There's a lot of farms now that have monocultures. In other words, they just grow maybe one thing, pumpkins or pickles or corn, and they require a balanced diet. And they cannot get it from one or two sources of pollen. The pollen is their protein source where they get their vitamins and their minerals and so forth. Mm-hmm. And that's, of course, from the plants. And the nectar that they gather from the flower is the carbohydrate, which gives them the energy.
Well, they certainly do have a cross-section of a diet right here at Brookdale.
They have
peaches up there and raspberries and corn and pumpkins.
Exactly. They do have a pretty good variety here, but you have to keep in mind that, for instance, cherry trees that we just passed down here, they bloom for about 2 weeks. That's food for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then they have to have another variety besides those. And of course they have blueberries down here, and that's another variety of plant. And then after the blueberries are gone by, during the time of the blueberries, they have all these raspberries and blackberries here. So they do have somewhat of a varied diet.
Yeah.
But if they were in a different place where they just grow corn or just blueberries or just one of anything, they have to find a supplemental source somewhere in the area.
Well, we're just like humans, you know.
Exactly.
We have to have a variation, variety in our diet to be healthy.
Mm-hmm. And the larger the areas that they plant with monocultures now, it makes it more difficult for the bees to find a variable diet.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So you're going to open up this beehive and show us what's in there?
Sure.
Okay.
Let me just Probably most people see, when they see a beekeeper, they carrying a smoker with smoke billowing out. Nowadays, the more modern hobbyist beekeeper, I'm somewhere in between a hobby and a business. I'm what they call is a semi-professional, and a lot of us now are going to a liquid smoke. It's the barbecue smoke that you might squirt on your barbecue if you want a smoky flavor.
Oh, really?
It's a food grade product, and it works almost as good as a real smoker, but it's much more convenient. And typically what we do before we open a beehive is we smoke it. So I'm going to spray some smoke.
I'm going to step away.
I'm going to spray some smoke. Well, smoke calms them down, really. It slows down the activity of the hive. What they claim it does is it simulates a natural fire condition where the bees smell smoke.
Oh.
And if the bees smell smoke, then they're smart enough to know that, well, we may get burned out and we may have to leave our residence. So what they do is they start to engorge on honey, so they'll fill up before they're going to leave. So if we simulate a fire, they're going to start engorging on honey, and it takes their attention away from the beekeeper.
Oh,
We trick
clever.
them. We're tricking
Very
the bees.
Clever.
So as you notice, I smoked the entrance to the hive with this liquid smoke, and now what I'm going to do is take the cover off. We use this thing, it's called a hive tool. You'll see how it's used in various ways. It has a scraper on it and a pry bar, and it's a universal tool. Now, oftentimes there's an inner cover in this hive that sometimes either sticks to the outer cover, and you plop that down there. Sometimes this will be stuck to here and I'd have to pry it off, but it came off with the outer cover this time.
Now, are these drones in here, or are they
No.
worker bees?
They're 99% worker bees.
Worker bees.
Yes.
And where does the queen hang out?
The queen hangs out typically down in the lower section of the hive.
Where it's cooler?
In the brood. The way the bees lay out their hive is they organize it such that the brood, which is the young bees that mature and develop, is in the lower part of the hive, and their storage, their food storage area, is in the upper part of the hive. So, and these boxes that you see here are called supers, honey supers, brood supers, or brood chambers down in the lower section. So what I'll do is I'll pry off this honey super. This is a honey super on top here. I will smoke it a little bit, and I'll pry it
Why don't
off.
you smoke them down there a little bit? They're making me a little nervous.
No, they're not going to see. They're not bothering us. All they want to do is go back in the hive.
Go back in the hive. Go
So
back home.
I'm going to pry this off. But before I do that, why don't
It really does calm them right down, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Why don't I just pry out one of these frames and show you what we have in here? Actually, this is called foundation that we use in the hive. It's a starter thing where the bees will build their comb on it. I think there's one here. This is a new box that was put on recently, and they've just started to draw the comb out on these frames. As you notice, I use the hook on this bar to pry these out. You see they're starting to draw the wax out on the comb?
Oh, yeah.
Like that.
I'm just focusing on the
We use a plastic foundation or wax foundation. A lot of us now are going to the plastic because it's more durable.
It's easier to clean, probably.
Yeah, exactly. And it's stronger. It doesn't break. Sometimes when we put these in the extractor, we put this in the extractor and spin it. And oftentimes, if it's loaded with honey, if it has a wax rib instead of a plastic rib, sometimes it will break. It'll pop because of the spinning effect. But the plastic ones, they don't break.
How often do you harvest, or when do you harvest?
Typically, this time of year is when I will be harvesting. Yeah. You can harvest when it's available. During the early honey flow, it's possible to harvest honey in maybe June. But if you do it in June, then you probably have to do it again in the fall because of what they bring in the summertime.
Of course, that's when they're their product is available is during the summer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And as soon as they bring in a sufficient amount of what the beekeeper thinks that, well, I can get some honey, some surplus honey from them, then they take it off. There's one slight disadvantage of harvesting the honey early, because you realize that they have to have a good supply for the winter. If you take the honey early, then you're assuming they're going to gather more and they will have a sufficient
But there's
amount.
nothing left for them to gather from.
There is bloom through most of the summer, right in through October. The goldenrod, for instance, is a source of nectar where the bees can store honey. So it's possible that if you take honey off in June, it's possible that they could bring in enough for them.
But it's going to have a whole different flavor. Your spring honey, because it's going to be all clover and...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every flower has its own flavor. So most of the honey that you find in the supermarket is what is called a blend. They blend it with various honeys. And typically they market their lighter honeys just for visual purposes. And of course, most of the honey, supermarket honey, what I call the supermarket honey, the big packers, they pasteurize the honey.
It's processed.
They take any particles that are in the honey are removed, and what this does is delay the granulation process, the crystallization.
Oh.
The crystallization. And most of us smaller beekeepers, we don't pasteurize the honey, so it will crystallize quite readily.
I've noticed that it crystallizes like within 6 months if it's in the pantry.
It can crystallize even quicker than that, depending on what floral source it's from. Every floral source will have a crystallization time period.
What I do is I put it in the microwave and
Sure.
just heat it up a little bit, and it goes right back to its natural state.
Exactly. Unfortunately, some people think that you have to throw it out if it crystallizes, but that's a misnomer. You don't.
It's perfectly all right to eat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And actually, what they call whipped honey or honey spread, that is a crystallized honey.
Oh.
So it's just a fine crystallized honey.
Well, they're really quieted down.
Yeah. Anyways, I will take this, what's called a honey super, off the top here.
Oh my goodness, look at them all.
Yeah. They glue these things together with pitch from the plants. It's called propolis.
Here they are. They get to be more and more.
So this box is pretty near full of honey.
Look at that. You want to turn that around so the camera can see that?
This here is a pollen patty.
Pollen patty.
Pollen supplement patty. We supplement their foraging pollen with a commercial product.
And what is that made out of?
It's made out of soy flour and some other different things that I'm not quite sure, other than the soy flour I know they use. And it's had nutrients put into it.
And that's just to supplement
Vitamins,
their diet.
Yep, exactly. And that's one of the things that help us keep the bees going when they're in a modest pesticide environment. Keep them as healthy as we can, make sure they get all the nutrients they need and everything, and they can fight off some of these adverse things that are in their environment. And I'm gonna give these girls a squirt like this, and
they go down.
Reduce the population on top here.
Yeah. And they just go further down the more you spray them.
Exactly. And I will pull one of these frames out and see what we come across. We may see the queen. I'm not going to pull all the frames, but we'll pull one out here, one or two, and see what we find.
They certainly don't mind you messing around there, do they?
No, bees are much more docile than a lot of people think. And you just have to be rather gentle with them.
Oh my.
Okay, what we have here is these capped cells. This is young bees being developed, brood. That's we call it brood. And typically in the summertime, this time of year, the queen cuts way back on the brood rearing, laying eggs, because they know winter's coming. They don't need it. The bees that are born this time of year live 3 to 4 times longer than the ones that are born in the summertime. The summer lifespan of a bee is about 30 days.
Why is it so much longer now? They just...
Because it's the way they are fed. The larvae is fed more nutritious, and they have more fat bodies in the young bees, that they're able to live longer.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But if I were
They're
to
not sent out to work right away. They just kind of hang around all winter and fatten up a little bit.
well, actually, they're fattened up when they come out, when they emerge. It's because of the way they have been fed in the development process. And in the summertime, these frames would be full of this capped brood, because they'd be in full bore. I'll set this down here and just put one more frame. Let's see what we have. I'm going to give these girls another squirt of this and just...
Now, how can you tell if they're healthy, or is it just by their activity, or?
Mostly by the population of the colony. If they're raising lots of bees, then they're usually pretty healthy.
So this looks like
this is a good healthy colony.
It's a good healthy one.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
I just kind of scanning here to see if we happen to pull the queen up, but don't usually, you know. Sometimes the first frame you pull, well, there's the queen, but no, not here.
No?
No.
How many queens are in a hive? Just one?
That's one. Yeah, typically one. Occasionally there'll be two. There might be a mother-daughter, you know. And when that situation, usually the mother usually doesn't live only maybe a couple of months beyond.
Oh, really?
The time that there is the second queen.
So it's a very short life, huh?
Yeah, but the queens themselves, if they don't have any competition like another queen that's emerged, they will live 2 or 3 years anyway, sometimes longer. But they're usually beyond 3 years. They're not too productive. See this thing buzzing around my face here?
Yeah.
That's a yellow jacket.
Oh.
That's not a bee.
Well, I think we should start closing up the hive and stop bothering these pretty ladies. So.
All right, we'll close it up. Well, what I'll do is I'll smoke them to get them to go down in between the frames. So when I put this box back on, there's a lot less chance of squashing
them.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me ask you, do you ever put any of your hives in private gardens?
Typically not, unless they're willing to accept 5 hives anyway, because I have to visit my colonies every 20 days because of the way I do mite control. Otherwise, keep the mite population down. I have to do what we call drone brood removal. There are various methods to control mites. Some are using miticides, which are chemicals. And then there's the natural process of letting the bees raise drones, which have a longer maturity cycle than the worker bees. And the mites are smart enough to recognize that they can get 2 or 3 more offspring if they reproduce in a drone cell.
Oh my goodness.
So they prefer the drone cells. So if we remove the drone frames before the drones emerge, the mites are in those cells, and we collect the drones with the mites and disperse of that frame and put another frame in so they can raise more drones and catch more mites. So we keep that up, and what I do with the drone brood is there is a market for brood. Some of the Asian customs insect is part of their diet, and I have a market for the drone brood. The people that migrant farm workers that come from Asia, that's part of their customary diet is insect brood.
Wow.
And I also have another place that I belong to an organic farm, CSA farm, a couple of them, and any of the drone brood that's not quite nicely formed, I give it to them for chicken feed.
Wow. Now, as a hobbyist of the gardener, what should we look for and stay away from in our gardens?
If you contemplate putting a beehive, you're talking about what would you do if you had a beehive?
No, just generally speaking, you know, if we have, like I have our oriental lilies, and they're infested with that little red beetle.
Oh.
And I use neem oil.
Okay.
Am I causing any damage for these ladies?
Usually the natural
organic.
non-chemical applications to control insects don't have a very adverse effect on pollinators.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
Yeah. That's probably why you're using neem oil.
Yeah.
Because it has.
Well, it was recommended to me because it's so effective with the red lily beetle.
Okay.
But I'm really been concerned about the environment and the bees.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's certainly worthwhile considering, and it's nice to know that people are now recognizing the fact that pollinators are essential to anything that grows.
Right.
Yeah. So we can put this box back on. What I'm going to do is get some of these bees down inside the frame that are hanging around on the bottom here. I'm going to scrape this off. So oftentimes we will scrape some of the burr comb off the frames. That's called burr comb, and that's so when we put it back together, there's less chance of squashing the bees.
Well, we certainly have a beautiful day for being out here.
Yep.
They were predicting rain, and then I thought, thought we'd have to postpone it, but then keep a close eye on the weather, and you can see how it changes from day to day.
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed, the bees are walking on me.
How often do you get stung?
Seldom.
Seldom?
Usually when I get stung, it's my fault because I accidentally pinch a bee, something.
Oh,
and
okay.
they respond. So.
Now these are in a whole class by themselves. They have nothing to do with like the bumblebees that we see in our gardens.
That's right. Yeah, the honeybee. One of the reasons that honeybees are used for pollination, and because they're fairly easy to move around, and they have large populations. You know, bumblebees, a nest of bumblebees, maybe a big nest of bumblebees could be 400 or 500 bees. Now, when you consider that the 40 to 50,000 pollinators that are in one of the boxes.
Now, what happens when the queen dies?
If the queen dies, they have the capability of raising a new queen by the way they feed the young developing larvae. And it has to be a female larvae, not a worker larvae, not a drone larvae. Of course, they know which one it is.
Yep.
So they can raise a new queen. And
they don't have a queen in waiting?
Not really.
No.
But that's not as funny as it might sound, because when a queen gets worn out, when she gets to the point where she can't lay fertile eggs any longer, they raise queen cells, new queens in preparation of replacing the old queen.
Okay, so we do have a queen in waiting.
It's kind of like that, yes.
Yeah, good.
Yes.
Okay.
See, all this sticky stuff that you see is what's called bee glue. It's a propolis, which is a wax resin combination.
Reminds me of pine
They bring in the
pitch.
resin and mix it with the wax and make a glue out of it. paste things together, fill up cavities.
Yeah. Okay, go back to sleep, ladies.
Yeah,
Make your honey.
it's cord. And it's all buttoned up.
All buttoned up. Very, very nice. Well, thank you so very much, Alden.
You're very welcome.
It's been, I just finished reading an article in Time magazine a couple of weeks ago about the bees.
Uh-huh.
It was very interesting.
Well, that's what got me started. They were interesting.
Yeah, well, yeah. How long have you been doing this?
Actually about 38 years, I believe.
And how did you get interested?
Well, my background is in engineering. And for some reason I said, you know, and at that time when I was employed as an engineer, early on I was doing TV service work as side work, you know, on the side. And for some reason or other I said, you know, this is nice work, I like that work, but I said I'd like to get into something different. I wanted something very different than what I'm doing. And I saw a little blurb in the local newspaper, beekeeping classes starting with such and such a time in a certain place. And I said to my son, I said, look at this, Lee. I said, this looks kind of interesting. Should we go and see what this is about? We went.
And you were hooked.
That got me started.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
How many beekeepers are in the area, do you know?
Gee, there are 5 or 6 beekeeping clubs within the state now. In the western part, the central part here, there's the Seacoast, and there's Kearsarge, and there's the lake area is another one. And so the state organization, I think, has registered something like 300 or 400 beekeepers, but that's only a small fraction of what the beekeepers in the state. I'm going to guess that there's probably at least 1,500 beekeepers in the state.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. We, in our club, Merrimack Valley Club, we have over 100 in the club. And some of the Concord area, I think they have close to 100.
After our visit with Alden, Linda enjoyed browsing through Brookdale Farms shop, where she discovered some honey-related products. A Just for Fun woven beehive, adorable beeswax candles, pine cone or beehive shaped, complete with embossed bees, and of course Brookdale Farms bottled honey made from Alden Marshall's own beehives.
Well, that does it for today. Hope you enjoyed our little tutorial about bees, and please join us again for our next episode. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.